This is the first day of the November 89 7-day retreat at Springwater. In a first talk of a retreat, we always talk about authority. Authority attributed to the person who is talking, and authority in general. And we also ask, what is our relationship with each other during a talk, in this retreat, during a meeting? We talk about listening to a talk such as this. We've done it every time. Talks now have been given, just flashing back for 13 years or 14 years. But this is a very, very important topic not to omit. Because no matter how clearly we may understand at the moment of listening to a talk about this whole thing of authority, wanting authority, projecting authority, and wanting authority for oneself, despite of understanding that at the moment of a talk or a moment of thinking about it, what is utterly essential is to see it as it is happening. The projection, wanting it, or wanting authority in someone else, or wanting to be in charge oneself and telling others what to do, what to believe, what is right and wrong. Whether saying it so many times in ever new ways has an effect or not on our moment-to-moment living and thinking and acting, who knows? We have to see for ourselves. So how does one listen to a talk like this? Listening out of a morning and a half an hour round of quietness. Maybe one has gotten up early and sat or walked around. Not talked to anyone. Maybe the body and mind somewhat slowing down, maybe not. But around us it's quiet. We're not engaged in conversation. So how does one listen out of this quietness to someone saying something? Pointing something out. How does one listen? And we're wondering whether the mind in listening can be open, not anchored in a belief, an opinion, a conviction, which immediately hinders free listening, not engaged in constant comparison. What she says with what I have heard others say or write. Is it possible for a mind to openly listen to what's there? Opinions may come up, convictions, comparison, but as that comes up, can that also be seen as a process of this moment, and how it detracts attention to listening to what is being said, to thinking and comparing? wanting to defend what one knows, what one believes to be true. Begin from moment to moment to have insight into what is going on as one is listening to a talk. The inner processes of already knowing or comparing, of defending or of agreeing. And at that moment is there the clarity and simplicity of listening to what is being said. We're also wondering whether in listening to what is being said, the mind can actually be engaged in looking. Not thinking, but looking, which may need access to memory. Looking whether what is being said is actually so, according to what one sees to have been so, or to be so this instant. In other words, not depending on just the words and the intellectual verbal understanding, but a flexibility of mind which can listen and also look at the same time. Not adopt something, take it over, commit it to memory and to knowledge, but listening with a certain tentativeness, wondering whether what is said is actually so and can be seen by oneself to be so or not to be so, or questioned. And if one doesn't see it to be so, can one bring it up in a meeting? What did you mean when you said that? I don't understand that, or I don't see it that way. Can we go over it again or into it freshly? That's even better, because we can never quite go over what happened here. I don't remember exactly what I say. But I can look again, we can look together freshly. If something is unclear or uncertain, or seems to be outright false, not to assume that the person who's sitting here is infallible, whatever she says must be right because she's been doing this for so long, has a certain reputation. Can all of that not be there in listening? Or if it's there to be seen as a hindrance, reputation, what one knows and has remembered, so that there's a renewing of looking, a renewing of listening right this instant. Sometimes people say to me, how can you stand saying the same thing over and over again, getting the same questions over and over again? But maybe I couldn't stand it if this was exactly how it was, saying the same thing over and over again. But to me, it's not saying the same thing over and over again. It's looking at the thing freshly and allowing new words to come, or when there are old words, just to say them freshly. To look at the problem anew, afresh, which comes out of a state of mind of not knowing, and therefore looking, together, alone, and allowing words to come and formulate what needs to be said in the presence of a problem, the problem here being authority. That one's words may be taken as the word, the right thing, the correct information, or the correct guidelines, because of attribution to one of authority, expertise, or knowledge. And what is essential for us human beings, each one of us, including myself, is to see for ourselves, look and listen for ourselves. Listen to what somebody says, and it can be enormously helpful, somebody pointing out something very clearly. But deceptive things can also be pointed out very clearly. Cannot assume that because somebody states something very clearly or intensely, powerfully, that therefore it's true. May or may not be, but what is essential is that we ourselves see for ourselves, not as a new authority, but as an open looker or seer or listener and discoverer, a new questioner. When that happens among human beings, something really fresh and radically new is taking place. People not depending on someone else, what he or she said, but finding out for themselves by grappling with a problem, sitting with it or looking into it, walking with it, discussing it with others, bouncing it off someone else, as we say. But needing to come to clarity oneself. It's helpful to hear someone say something, but it is not helpful just to take it over. Then this whole capacity to see for ourselves and think intelligently for ourselves doesn't evolve. Or if there's a little bit of it, it may atrophy in the presence of a strong person who pronounces things very intensely. We have not been trained almost at any time of our life to think for ourselves. We've grown up believing that the older ones, the bigger ones, the ones who've had more schooling or more training, know more, know better. And that there is meaning in believing in the word, the book, the pronouncement from a higher spot, even physically higher elevated, like some pronouncement coming from a pulpit or a lectern elevated. Political rallies or in congressional investigations, the one who's investigating or talking or making a speech always sitting higher. We've been trained to be impressed by that, to allow that to have an impact on our accepting it, or just being conditioned by it, being formed by it, without knowing it, without realizing it. And what we're asking here in a retreat, a quiet, small, silent retreat, is whether we can begin to realize how conditioned we are. Not condemn it, not immediately move in on it, but become aware of it. It's the awareness that acts, not any resolution now to change the conditioning. Clarity of awareness has its own impact, which is not explainable. It just acts. Something changes when it is clearly seen. If it doesn't change, then thought has already taken over. Awareness is not functioning. Thought of I should not be like that, or why shouldn't I be like that? It's my nature. That kind of thought prevents change, or it initiates a violent change, trying to think in new terms violently, meaning by force, through reward or punishment. As children, we were constantly made aware of or told that someone else knew better. Not to investigate, because that may be too dangerous. Or we were a nuisance with our questions and attempts to investigate to the adults, because we were upsetting things physically or mentally. in school? Is a teacher really free to question together with the children, or does she know? He knows. Maybe becoming a teacher already has that element in it. One wants to finally be one of those authorities that one always had to dread and follow as a child. Now one is in that chair oneself. And the gratification and security from it prevents opening up this whole problem of being authority. Because it is something to hold on to, something rewarding. And it seems to be a law, or let's rather say habitual, deeply ingrained habitual behavior among human beings. What we have suffered at the hands or mouth of another, we like to do ourselves, get the satisfaction for the suffering. It's all not a conscious process. Or maybe slightly conscious, but we immediately rationalize it. Maybe in driving, if somebody seems to get ahead of us on the highway, we have to get ahead of him or her. If somebody has slightly blocked our zooming off at the traffic light, we have to block that person. We don't spell it all out. It goes so mechanically, so automatically. Hurt or insult or restriction suffered wants to impose that on someone else to get satisfaction, except that it is an never-ending process, because now someone else is going to suffer. The thing is a perpetual motion process. Perpetual vendettas. Because we're not aware of what we're doing. The gratification of the moment, or the insult demanding revenge or gratification, is so strong that the whole body system is involved. Body-mind system is absorbed in it. With no space for wondering, what am I doing right? What's going on in the mind? I'm not saying that's impossible. It's very possible. That's what we're beginning to do here. As we're sitting quietly, or not as quietly maybe as we expected if we come here for the first time, imagining there's going to be peace in the mind and in the landscape. Instead, all the stuff, the anger of yesterday comes up, or the fear of all the yesterdays, because yesterday's fear includes all of the past fears. They may come up and not allow this peace, this inner peace to happen. But there is a quiet environment here to look at that and allow it to become conscious, aware, so that an intelligence unfolds in the mind to see what we're doing, what is being done and what is being done to us. This whole cycle of reaction and counter-reaction, and some more reaction and reaction to that, individually and collectively. And not just listen to the words right now and say, yes, she's right, this is so, or she's exaggerating, it is not so, but begin to observe it on the workplace, in the car, in the family, or here on the mat, or on the chair, as an event comes back into memory. Not just, I must feel the pain, I must feel the fear, but to see what causes it and how it perpetuates itself through actions which affect another person, another human being. And that other human being is exactly like we are in all of these propensities. So what we observe in ourselves, we're observing in everyone else. We're observing humanity sitting here on this chair or mat in action. Thought action, mental image action, and movement action. And of course, by movement, I mean all the glandular, muscular, organ movements that one thought elicits. One thought of what has happened to us, what has been done to us, or what could happen to us. We were starting out with authority. It has a function to talk about it, because having heard someone talk about these things makes it more likely to come upon it as it happens, and also to understand it deeper right now, if one really looks and doesn't just adopt, try to commit to memory. The mind is open, not stuck in a position. Ever since I've been sitting on a chair like this for the talk, rather than on the mat, due to some skiing injury, I've also mentioned to beware that the difference in height here that is resulting from that is not automatically taken as what I spelled out before, described before, somebody talking from a higher position. I mention it because someone mentioned it to me. Why are you sitting on a chair? And I felt you were talking down on me. The person was sitting very close at the time. It was a full retreat. And she felt that difference in height as impacting the receiver. But in becoming aware of it, pointing it out to me, looking at it, explaining the reason for sitting on a chair, and the freedom everyone has to also sit on a chair. One may not be as comfortable on a chair, but there's nothing created here on purpose. It's amazing how the first step is to become aware of something. I'm influenced by someone speaking down to me physically. Then what does the mind do once this has been realized, that this is taking place? Very, very essential. What is taking place at the moment of becoming aware of something? What then sets into motion? Interpretation. The allowing old programming to run their course, again unawares. One may feel rebellious against this person. Then does one justify the rebellion? I don't want to be taught by just one person here. This has often been mentioned to me too. Why do you give talks and not someone else? This comes in connection with my saying that I don't see myself as a teacher. I usually don't say this anymore, I've just said it again. If we feel rebelliousness against someone saying something, having a microphone, a seemingly elevated position? Can one leave that rebelliousness untouched by interpretation, not just allowing it to dip into the whole backlog of rebellion since we were 1 day old or 1 year old, but questioning it, letting it come to light, letting it unfold so one understands what moves one and has moved one for years and years and years. And how movement of either rebellion or following authority, both of them, both movements, prevent the openness of listening and investigating, alone or together. How they affect the whole body and encase it in a narrow field of all kinds of electrochemical action, thoughts and reactions of the glands, the muscles, the organs. Listening is a quieting of all of those physical and mental responses. Not knowing how to react. I don't know whether what she's saying is so. I have to find out. What I know may be mistaken or may be conditioned or programmed. Is it possible to see something freshly, not out of any past training? There's an immense question to ask. Somebody says, yes, it is possible, but that's not enough, is it? One has to find out for oneself whether it's possible and play with it, experiment with it, and in the process discover how held we are in opinion, position, defense. The moment one scratches the surface and looks a little bit deeper, one will find that this sense of me and my existence feels threatened. And with the threat of that, there's an automatic closing up and defending. But one can open it up again and wonder about this whole sense of me and my position, my worth, my knowledge, which one feels one has to defend in the face of other people's, or else put aside and follow something. To be a follower and feel a new gratification and security in that. We're talking about it this morning. Someone in a meeting, which I will interrupt at this moment and say something about using what is being talked about in meetings for going into and expanding, evolving in a talk. I'm trying to be very careful that the identity of the person who said it is not revealed, but it is a fact. It has become very clear over the many years of talking with people and working with people that they are not individual problems. The shading and coloring in particular form may have an individual aspect, but fundamentally our problems are shared. They're common. And someone who may be able to spell it out in a meeting, put it out there to be looked at, can help every one of us to look at a very similar problem in ourselves. So somebody mentioned apprehension about coming to a meeting. I don't remember all the details of it, but that's another thing. I will never be able to repeat verbatim what someone said or what I said, and that's not really essential. Essential is that we look at it freshly. But it may happen that by not using exactly the same words that were used, the person may feel that she or he were misunderstood. If that becomes a problem, then there will be more meetings to bring that up. We can go into anything. It doesn't matter whether it's been gone over before. This time it'll be new and different. So, what was brought up in the meeting was that there seems to be such a gap between oneself and this person, Toni, who one attributes all kinds of things to her. And something extraordinary, I think, was the word, an extraordinary person. How can one ever, in one's ordinariness, match that? Can one see immediately the difficulties that arise out of this comparison? And if we think it's impossible to ever match someone else, what does that do? What do those thoughts do? Because all thoughts link up with our whole physical system, cause what we call depression or despair or lethargy, hopelessness, escape, not wanting to face the thing because I won't be able to do it anyways. And what does it do to the relationship to this person that one projects extraordinariness upon? How can one relate in ordinary ways to a person one thinks is extraordinary? One can't. There's a hindrance to think that way. I don't think of myself as any. I'm interested, I'm open to listen to what you bring. Not that I'm ordinary or extraordinary. Ready to work, to look, to listen. On the same level, not looking down. Or speaking from a position of knowledge. Knowledge is a hindrance in looking freshly. It may be accessed in a certain way if needed, but not as a thing of augmenting the feeling of self or even establishing it. If everybody who just comes here every once in a while or for the first time would be living here on staff or as a guest or volunteer, they would find out much more about the ordinariness of this person, Toni. But it's not possible for everyone. So, can one begin to question one's ideas, one's attributions, and not take the idea, the image of someone for that person? That person is not an image. It's a live system of wondering and questioning and listening and looking. Saying things and also making mistakes in saying things. One may not see something clearly at the moment of trying to put it into words. That's why dialogue is very helpful. But then something very interesting was said by this person, who was obviously watching what was going on in herself. Well, then I all of a sudden feel, too bad I don't have an extraordinary person as a teacher. I want that. On the one hand, I dread it and fear it, and it causes me to feel not being able to match this or to really be like that. But when the person says, I'm not extraordinary, I'm very ordinary, just come here and live here for a while and you find out, then something anxious arises. I may not have an extraordinary teacher. And it's not a unique thing that was said this morning. It happens very frequently that people get angry at me for refusing to be their authority or their teacher. their guru. So can one see how one wants to have someone in an exalted position, or in an omniscient position? Why? To feel secure? And can one see what this does to this organism of such immense capacity to learn for himself, to learn for herself, find out directly, and begin to think intelligently, independently of what so-called authorities say? So, is it possible to put this yearning for the security of having someone who one can follow, putting that aside, even though it may ache at the moment or cause some feelings of uncertainty, insecurity? Live with these feelings of insecurity that arise when one finds oneself standing alone. And wonder about this whole thing of standing alone, listening on one's own, looking on one's own. One may come to a talk and something becomes clear, or come to a meeting and something clicks. But that click of this moment may not last. Our old opinions and feelings crowd in immediately. Maybe, maybe not. One has to find out. So, how will one cannot just constantly be around someone. Or read the good book all the time. Of course we do that. To make ourselves feel sure that there's somewhere out there, there's some absolute certainty in someone or in some book. But actually the way the world begins to look more and more even to what is called our exact sciences like physics, mathematics, as enormous uncertainty in this whole universe. As a factor, as a known factor, the uncertainty factor, or uncertainty principle. So, can one be in tune with that? It's a fact that there is uncertainty about the next moment. And if one does not bank on something or be anchored in something, then there is great flexibility and energy to be with this new moment, because the energy isn't invested in banking on something to be so for all eternity. We ourselves, people around us, the woods, the clouds, the animals, the grass and earth change every instant. Is one set apart by clinging to permanency? Or is there a possibility to move with change and always look afresh? Forget about the always. It's a way of putting it. There is no always. That's another ideal. And I don't want to propound ideals. Please call it to my attention if I do. To look afresh this moment at another person whom one knows what she did or he did to me, years ago or yesterday. But if one doesn't remember that or puts it aside, here is the possibility for a renewed relationship with the energy of nowness, of here-ness, which is the energy of a fresh morning. We saw it this morning. It was dark and gloomy, wasn't it? The clouds really seemed solidly locked into each other. And then, who knows where or why, there was a breaking up of all of that. Sun rays and all the colors on the clouds and sky and the brilliance on the weeds, the posts on the porch, suddenly lit in this bright orange light. Weather moves like that. It doesn't cling to past cloudiness. Can we move like that too? I don't mean irresponsibly, but openly, vulnerably. By vulnerably, I mean not shelling in and shelling up against hurt, against possible hurt. Feeling the hurt and finding out what hurts, what's going on right now as this hurt happens. To witness it as it happens. And by witness, I don't mean be feeling separate from it, but insight or awareness is not something separate. It just sheds light, like the sun coming through the clouds and illumining all the dried weeds and the green grass, the specks of dew and snow. Everything is illumined. If all trash would lie on the road, beer cans, that also would be illumined. For what it is, an empty beer can. So, what emerges from this as our relationship with each other? Does something emerge? Which does not mean that when one sits in the solarium, we've been trying to call it solarium to drop the word waiting line, but it always slips in again because, after all, well, let's call a spade a spade. People are waiting for a meeting. And people who've come for retreats for years tell me this, there's fear there. All of a sudden the heart starts pounding, thinking, I'm the next one through that door. All right, certain thoughts trigger certain feelings to see that as a fact. That's old conditioning, observable right this moment. But one can also realize that this fear of walking through the door or being the next when the door opens may have nothing to do with the situation right now, even though the heart is pounding as before when one saw someone behind the door. I don't know who that someone is in one's mind. Can be all kinds of authority figures. Mother figures, authority figures, religious or school or whatever. So the thing has taken place. It doesn't need elaboration. It's there very palpably. The heart palpitates palpably. It hasn't incapacitated anyone. I know it myself. Happens very quickly. The connections are so subtle. A very subtle instrument, this brain, body, mind. So the heart starts palpitating, it also slows down again. Particularly if one doesn't get upset over the palpitations. Then there's some more palpitating. In connection with a thought, something dangerous or disagreeable is going on. I don't want it. I don't want to have that. Immediately the body answers with some more responses. Can that, in the midst of feeling uncomfortable, can that be felt and seen and nothing more made out of it? Whatever has been made out of it is already there, but needs no more. With heart beating or maybe the breath a little bit short, we can begin to talk about whatever, maybe that very thing. I'm interested. I don't feel that there are, well, this is what the person also said, I feel that my problems or concerns are very petty. Implication being, should I bother you with petty problems? Or I shouldn't really. I should bring in something lofty. I think something lofty can be something even more petty. Pettiness is how we start. We are petty in our thoughts, in our concerns, our fears, wanting to appear worthy and afraid of doing the opposite, thinking the other person is more worthy. All of these are our petty ideas which hold us so imprisoned. But we start with those and we look at them. And no matter what it is we start with, we can go deeper. Deeper meaning looking what brings it about, what motivates it, what conditions it. And not just in me, but in you and you and you and all of us. To deepen and broaden the base and not let up questioning it. Then you and I are not two different parties. A worthy party and an unworthy party. We're looking at this thing together, alone. It doesn't matter, 1, 2, 3, or a group of 40 or 50 or 100. Can we look at the same thing together, this moment, without fear? And if fear comes up, well, then let's look at the fear. If the heart beats, well, let's feel it beating. Not be in conflict with it. If a denial mechanism comes up, maybe it's seen for the first time, denying it or trying to repress it. And one doesn't have to do that. One can feel a beating heart or a choppy breath or pain in the sternum. It's there, just like the cloud or the gray cloud or the pink golden cloud or no cloud. Whatever's there is there. Can we work like that, alone and together, as friends, sharing all the common problems that have plagued human beings since time immemorial and being shaped by that? Our present problems are shaped by all past problems felt and created and unresolved by human beings. We're not separate from the mass. We are that mass of past conditionings right now. And can there be a spark of awareness of that? Like sun breaking through a dense cover of clouds, shining on what's there, showing it up with its light and shadow. We will end here for today.